would not be as interested if I didn't have a technical co-founder. So I'm wondering what your perspective on that is.
Boo, nonsense. I think investors are usually most interested in seeing a business that's got some kind of evidence of traction, right? Something where they can see that the value proposition resonates with customers, and potentially some initial evidence of kind of the business case as well. And the truth is, getting there with code and with a technical co-founder is something which is probably going to take you 18 months before you start trading, on average, and getting there with no code is probably less than 18 weeks. And so, and also at that point in time, your cap table is going to be in a better state because you haven't given up a bunch of equity to get to where you needed to be. So all things considered, I think it's bad advice from your solicitor. But then again, I am conflicted in this sense in that we're a no-code investor.
Can I just ask one follow-up question, even though I know you said this isn't a technical room, but are you able to use like the LinkedIn API on Bubble?
Yep. Yeah. Although the LinkedIn API has got more restricted over time. If you really want to get a lot of power from the LinkedIn API, you need to be a LinkedIn partner, which is quite tough to be. But you can attach the API to Bubble, no problem at all, based on whatever permissions you've got.
Thanks, Steve. Brian, real quick, I know you are building something pretty significant. You've actually raised money, and a good chunk of your platform is on Bubble, so I wanted to kind of bring you up here and have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Simply. We are a machine learning-powered real estate marketplace that connects sellers of outdated and damaged homes with fix and flip and value-add real estate investors. And we handle all of the end-to-end complexity in between. So I'm actually an engineer by background. I'm also a huge no-code advocate, no-code, low-code advocate, because I don't believe in having to build things that you don't need to build. Spend the time on the things that actually matter. So for us, our entire front end is built on Bubble. That's our entire marketplace. That's our internal messaging systems. Pretty much anything outside our machine learning side of things, everything else is built on Bubble. And even a lot of our backend plumbing is built using low-code tools like Tray.io. We're a huge user of Tray. And the reason why is very simple. I'm a great engineer by my own admission, by my own ego, but I also know that where I need to spend my time. And spending my time is not having to, go and code a front-end UI and spend the money to do that, to hire someone to do that if I'm working on other things. I can do it in 10% of the time and have 95% of the same experience, if not 100% of the same experience, and do it with a lot less overhead, which means that my investors are happier.
Awesome, Brian. Thank you. Definitely stay on stage. We'd love to have additional founders building on here. And I'm gonna put you on the spot, but Jeff and Simon said they'd be happy to listen to pitches from No Code. So if you're open to it, you don't have to. Feel free to. In a second, I'm going to get through these other questions. Deepak's going to do the same. Braven, welcome to the stage. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for hosting. 5-time founder, former award-winning agency, creative director, designer, brand storyteller guy. So I'm definitely like the no-code guy. However, I did code back in the day, front end, like late 90s. It's not relevant anymore. But I think using things become so standardized now, it's really smart to have to be careful with that CTO position as a co-founder. I've been told the same. I'm not sure who mentioned it, Steve. I've been told the same thing by investors. You need to have a technical co-founder. But what I've done is I just added an engineer, sometimes like a mid-level engineer to my deck, who's has a hand in building my prototype, my MVP, and that usually does the trick. So, because the CTO is such a costly thing with equity and salary, and it takes time, and then they're not necessarily going to be hand doing everything either, or don't want to. CTOs want to do the leadership stuff as well, the strategy stuff. So I think it's important to do that. I think it's also important to note too that I built my last business, which is a complete failure. We built our e-com platform on Shopify, and I hated it as a designer because it's horrible UX. It's super limiting, and we're in the era where UX drives sales. And so it's really important for us to remember that although we're low code, no code, some of these out-of-the-box platforms are not exactly geared towards UX. Squarespace is great too. Like our current site, 3good.com, is it's on Squarespace, and it doesn't drive conversions the way a custom UX would. So I do encourage you to look at UX as just as important as a mid-level engineer. And my question would be, off my statement, how do you guys feel about that? Because UX involves front-end development. Should we prioritize front-end code because we know it drives conversions over back-end, or not?
I'll go on, Simon. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think just going back to Steve and Braden's point about investors, I think that's a delayed indicator that we're hearing. Like, you must have a CTO or a tech co-founder. I think most investors are smart people. They just haven't caught up yet because they didn't realise that no code was a thing. They'd heard about it, but didn't realise it got moved as fast as it has. So I suspect in another 6 to 12 months, like that won't be a problem anymore. Investors will not be saying that. So it may be a very short-term challenge that we've got. In terms of the front-end, back-end debate, I mean, my answer is that what you need to do in the early stages of your startup is prove the value proposition, prove that you can acquire customers, prove that you can, the unit economics make sense, etc. Now, if that requires a really good-looking front end, then yeah, absolutely. But if it doesn't, then don't worry. It probably doesn't require much of a back end, is what I would say, because you can get away with a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I can just. I'll jump briefly in after Simon. He's absolutely right. But there's a caveat there, which is that sometimes to prove that value proposition, most of what you need to do is in the back end and not the front end. So it is a horses for courses. We had a founder come to us today, really, really nice project. It requires quite a lot of back-end business logic just to do the very basic MVP. But the front end is a very, very simple thing that we could knock out in 10 minutes, with the most junior developers. So there are cases where it's kind of upside down on what Simon just said. So which is really helpful to you. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you, Brave. And Lale, welcome to the stage. Good to see you again. I know you've been in a lot of the investor rooms and with John, so love to hear what your question is.
Hi, thank you so much for taking me and letting me ask my question. My question is rather simple. By the way, I'm an operating partner from Can Do Ventures, and we mostly focus on high-tech companies who are providing platforms to non-tech companies. So my question is basic, so forgive me if it's something that I should not be asking, but for selfish reason, I want to understand the fundamentals. And we get approached by a lot of, companies who are providing platforms and that are, they are claiming there are no-code companies and providing solutions to those who are non-tech. At what point would you consider a company being a no-code company? I realize that a lot of inquiries we get and a lot of these companies who reach out to us, they say they are no-code, and in the middle of conversation or while they are giving us a demo, we find out, okay, there is still some coding involved. So at what point would you say a company or a solution is a no-code company as opposed to low-code? Because it is important when we write the memos, for example, about a portfolio company that we are supporting, it is important that we claim it right. So I apologize again for the simplicity of the question. Thank you. This is Lale, and I'm out.
Hey, that's a great question. I think the answer is a little bit like the Turing test. If somebody with absolutely no coding experience can produce a product out of the back end of that platform, that's a no-code platform, right? If you take that same person and put them on a platform and they reach a threshold where they can't produce what they want to produce with it because they have to learn to code, not a no-code platform. That would be my definition. I wonder what everybody else's here is, though.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd just say it's. I guess it's a changing world as well. It's changing environment very quickly. If you take a pure no-code platform like Bubble, as soon as you start installing, plugins or connecting it to API or doing what Brian's doing and actually building, connecting into a coded bit, the question becomes, well, where there are bits that are no code and there are bits that are code and there are bits that are low code. So what is this startup? It's all of those things. It's low code, no code, and code. So I agree. It's. I guess there's no black and white answer to this. It's a lot of grey area, and I think we're going to see even more of that because Brian's startup is going to be more the norm, where people are mixing the code and the no code environments together.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Lila, just to kind of just add in there for a second,
Sure.
the approach that we're taking is one that I recommend to my own portcos, which is build where your skills lie and build where you need to build. So, like for us, I can't do a no-code machine learning algorithm. I can't I can't build those back-end systems using no-code. But what I can do is I can build a kick-ass front end that is going to dramatically streamline my design build flow and do it a lot more efficiently. And if we hit a point from a scale standpoint where we need to go and recode, we can do that. But it's not something that we have to do at the stage that we're at. So why spend the resources there? And from an investor point of view, optimization of capital deployment is where that comes into play. If they're able to achieve an equal or better outcome in less time with less capital and less resources, then that means that the capital efficiency that they are then performing within is dramatically increased. My take. I'm Brian. I'm done.
Very good. Thank you. You just addressed what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Great, Lale. Thanks for your question. Joe, good to see you again. Did you have a question?
I just had a comment because this taps into something that you probably have been in a room with me before that I bring up every once in a while. And that is that I see a lot of founders, especially first-time founders, fall into a trap that I call confusing the tool with the job. For so long, we thought that the value was in, or we've been trained to think that the value is in the product or in the code. And as I think everybody on the top row has already pointed out, really the purpose of a startup is to validate a business model, not to build the product. And as Brian pointed out, when you can do that as inexpensively and quickly as possible, that allows you to do all of the things that we've been taught that you need to do. It lets you fail fast. It lets you refine that value proposition so that you're maximizing your value in the marketplace. And then Brian made an outstanding point that I was going to make. He beat me to it, as he often does in these rooms. And that is, later on, if to get to scale, you need a more bespoke custom code base, then one, you've got cash flow to support that. And two, you've validated the model so that you're building the right custom code base rather than doing something that's really expensive to change later on. So just some thoughts, and I'm Joe, and I'm out.
Awesome. I have a feeling there's going to be some agreement up here, but Simon, Geoff, anyone?
Yeah, it's hard to fault any of that.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to take a few more questions, but and then I'm going to save some time for both Deepak and Brian to pitch their businesses to Million and Simon. Hold on one second here. We'll take a couple more. Benjamin, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks for hosting another amazing room, and for everyone participating. Appreciate the insight and your time.
Perfect. What do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do actually. I think that the evolution of low-code, no-code options for founders is fantastic. As someone who's a non-technical founder myself, I think it really unlocks the ability to explore just complete revolutions of industry and deployment of ideas that we could never do before. So for anyone who's pro that and facilitating that, it's fantastic. Thank you. Keep doing it. With that said, a question that comes to mind that is often, I would say, an area of confusion and concern, whether it's in conversation with investors or possibly when you're evaluating moats in a business model for the sake of attracting larger market share over a particular period of time. A lot of that conversation is focused on IP and technology. And so a question is whether you in fact have trade secrets or a patentable solution, whether it's a technology or a system method or process. How does low code and no code solution affect that? How does it play into it? Do you think it negates the ability to truly have IP or trade secrets that can be fundable, protectable, et cetera? Just looking for some thoughts on that. Thanks.
Simon, Justin, or do you have any? Or Brian?
Yeah, I wanted to give the option for Simon and you guys to respond first, but I have both the legal opinion from my attorneys, and I also have my own personal opinion.
Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, sure. So intellectual property has to be built around a process or an invention. How you execute the process is irrelevant. When you're building on something like Bubble, you are building in the same mental model as if you were building a React app. It's a front-end tool at the end of the day with some back-end plumbing, which means that your IP should not be related to how you're executing. It should be related to the process that is being executed. Does that make sense, Benjamin? Before I move on?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you could choose to build that in any programming language. You're never going to be able to have any IP around why you chose that language. You could build on any platform, any cloud hosted, set of resources. You're never going to own that IP either. Where you build IP is in the function that you are actually delivering and the efficiency and the revenue generating activities that are associated with that. So if you believe that you've created a process that simplifies, streamlines, or otherwise makes life better or easier for somebody, then how you execute building that is completely irrelevant to the value you're actually creating. People don't buy the code you're building, they're buying the process that you built. I'm Brian, I'm done.
Yeah, that is very sage. And I think, would a fair test be, in your opinion and experience, Brian or others, that if you were to look at a joint solutions diagram of your tech stack and or your process diagrams, if you were able to swap a no code or low code option or block out for a full code one at any point in time, and it would still function the same way, you could ideally, say that is something that is process oriented versus technology oriented. Therefore, it could be part of your system method process from an IP standpoint. Is that a fair test?
I don't know what the lawyers would say. I mean, and the interesting thing is it's different in Europe to it is in the US because we can't quite achieve the same sort of patterns around code as you can over in the US. So some of the argument doesn't hold up in Europe anyway. I mean, I think Brian's absolutely right. And I think it's a relatively good test, whether you're swapping out, I don't know, React for some other front-end framework or back-end framework, whatever it is, or you're swapping in a low-code, no-code solution. I think Brian's absolutely right. It's not about the platform or the tech stack you're using. It's about all the other bits in between. It's your processes, as Brian absolutely said.
Awesome. No, that's great feedback, guys. I appreciate it. And I'll let someone else jump in for another topic unless you want to continue.
Well, yeah, and Benjamin, real quick, there is a IP room, I think on Fridays, if I'm correct. If not, I'll get back to you at the time, but there is an IP attorney there, and I think there's specifically a software IP attorney that I've actually asked questions to, because, I had the same questions you do, so that might be a better room to get the specific legal questions answered.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. And Ben, just two very specific things I wanna just point out. Specifically in the case of Bubble, you own the intellectual property of anything you create on Bubble. You don't own the underlying platform. So the way you do it, you own. The back end way it executes, you don't, insofar as like the actual back end code base itself. Obviously, anything you integrate in, so on and so forth, you own all of that. The other thing that I wanted to point out is just, keep in mind, no one is ever going to be able to monetize, except for the person that currently owns the patent, on how to make a phone vibrate. But the reason the phone vibrates is something that is completely greenfield. And with that, I'm done.
Makes complete sense. And do you guys who have any sort of investor angle here view this really strategic mindset as in the same way, meaning like this is fully investable, even though these are different tools that exist like Bubble and I don't know, Integromat or Zapier or whatever it is, like we're using existing low code, no code tools to create a solution and a process. This is IP, this is fundable or investable. Is that a similar perspective?
I mean, yeah, from our point of view, absolutely. I mean, we're specifically targeting startups that are built on a no-code stack. So, yeah, we would say that. But absolutely, it's fundable, because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a good quality business with the value proposition proved or being proved out. Monthly recurring revenue, customers, etc. Who cares what the stack is built on? If you've got a run rate, an MRR of $10,000 a month, who cares what the tech stack is? Realistically, investors, all those problems go away as your revenue and your profitability increases.
Great, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all the feedback.
And Ben, I'll just answer this. As a real life example, that I have a tier 1 VC in my current capital stack. I will tell you, how I'm building it has never come up in any conversation ever.
Noted. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you, Benjamin, and thanks again for stopping in. We're going to take 2 more questions today. Laura, welcome to the stage.
Hi, thank you very much. And sorry, before my goldfish memory does anything wrong to me, Simon absolutely agreed with you when, in regards to European laws, how they're completely different towards in comparison with the US. I have stumbled upon quite some issues over the years. But hi guys, my name is Laura. I'm in the marketing tech industry primarily. And honestly, this conversation has sparked one very maybe stupid question actually. But what does the future even look like? Because let's put it this way, 10 years ago, everything when it comes to non-tech was very different towards how we see it now. And even I feel like a lot of people still don't know about it enough. For why, I would not know, but if you ask any second entrepreneur that you see, that you meet on the street, half of them will not even know what it is. And so my question in that regard would be, what would you believe is the future, let's say 5 to 10 years time from now?
I'll say that. So it's a really interesting question. We got into this because we wanted to at least be far enough ahead of the curve with regard to no code that we could kind of see what was in front of the wave a little bit better than perhaps people that were behind us, so we took the risk of jumping in. I think it's interesting. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a musician, and so I lived through the sort of digital, first of all, the birth of digital distribution of music, and then the birth of digital production of music. And with that came all of the concepts of sort of democratization of music, and artists would have more access to audiences. And in actual fact, I think what happened was an enormous amount of turmoil that didn't necessarily serve the people that were underserved before. And I think software is going to go through turmoil too. I think if we'd have looked at music before the iPod came out and or when the iPod came out and tried to predict what the future looked like, we would get it wrong. And I think the same is true of what's happening to software as a net result of no code. So, what we do know is that whereas before there was a gate, if somebody wanted to build, I don't know, a two-sided marketplace to serve some kind of medical industry, I don't know, doctors talking to people over Zoom or something, right? One startup or maybe a handful of startups would get funded enough to release an MVP. And now, 100 startups, maybe 1,000 startups can release that same MVP for a few bucks. We're also in a situation where if a startup launches and is successful, take Clubhouse, every kid that's figured out how to use a no-code platform can release Clubhouse version 2.0 sort of 2-3 weeks later, right? So I guess what that's going to mean is an enormous amount of competition. It's going to mean that the model that we have for pre-seed and seed funding is just gone in the bin. It is going to mean that some kids that were never going to get as far as, get big are going to get big really quickly, like some of the artists that boomed on MySpace and stuff like that. That's going to happen, right? We're going to get some hit records in startup terms from people that nobody sees coming. But 5 years out, I don't know. I think coders are going to have to focus on, what it means losing the simple work that they're doing today. I know that, but that's about. So I don't think that's an answer. I think that's just a bunch of questions. I apologize, but I find it a fascinating subject, obviously.
Just my guess, and it is a guess as well, is that as Geoff said, we're going to see all of the low-end work disappear out of the coding market. So if you're, a WordPress developer, your days are possibly numbered. So all of that's going to disappear, and the coding solutions are going to be the very, not niche, but the more complicated environments that can't be done in no code at the moment. Gartner produced a report, I think it was a couple of months ago, and I think the figure was, and I stand corrected, was something like 67% of all code will be no code by 2024. That's like 3 years away. I mean, that's crazy. So I can see, if you talk to some of the kind of evangelists around this area, they're talking about voice activated code where you describe the app, as Geoff just said, I want a two-sided marketplace for the medical industry. 5 minutes later, pops out an app. That could be the future, maybe.
I'd love to jump in here because I will tell you an actual transformation story of how this is actually changing, in the world. My previous exit was a company called Motion AI. We sold to HubSpot in 2017, and we became the basis of what is now the HubSpot chatbot platform. Motion AI, I became part of Motion AI right after the exit of my previous startup, which was called Wink Research. At Wink, we were attacking a space in the medical industry that was transcription, coding, and billing, because there's tremendous inefficiency there, massive amount of human error, 65% average success rate with a human transcription and coding process, which leaves huge amounts of money on the table. At that time, visual chatbot development tools, low-code, no-code chatbot development tools did not exist. It took us 2.5 years to build the system that allowed our conversational AI to function. At Motion, I was able to replicate that exact same thing on our own platform in a matter of days. What you're seeing, and that was something that, that was one of the early, before Bubble, it was actually Bubble came out right around the same time. But those were the early days of this real no-code transformation. Before that, it was this idea of automating BPM, business process stuff. What's happened today is now you have this rise of, on the back end, citizen automators, on the front end, citizen designers, where you're seeing an empowerment of things that are largely logic driven, be able to be developed by somebody that understands the logic of the solution, but just doesn't know the specific language. And that becomes more and more successful and more interesting, because it means that there's a wider pool of people that are going to be able to develop a solution without having to rely on an ever dwindling pool of engineers. I'm done.
That is actually very interesting. Sorry, I'm in the kitchen at the same time. Otherwise, the mister won't be very happy. But actually, that's very interesting what you mentioned and everything, because I had this exact conversation not that long ago. And a lot of this actually has come back in conversation. And someone earlier mentioned, I think it was Simon. Sorry, I haven't been paying attention to my screen. How about exactly these WordPress and Wix? Will that, like, for example, all disappear, do you think, in the coming years? Or will that remain to a certain extent, but, like, be less active? Let's put it that way. Or do you still believe that it will still remain as a big business?
I think the Wix and the Squarespace of this world will, I mean, they're effectively no-code platforms anyway. I think WordPress has always been this hybrid of, it's kind of a no-code platform because you can install a template, build your own website, etc. But there's a gap, and people are trying to add plugins to it and trying to make it into what we would term an app, and you reach the limits of it pretty quickly. And that's where no-code solutions like Bubble and some of these others kind of kick in. So I think their lunch is being eaten from both sides. So the top end is being eaten by the no-code platforms, and the bottom end is being eaten by the no-code platforms like Wix and Squarespace. So they'll always exist. I mean, we've got stuff that's still on the internet from 20 years ago. So it's a long tail, but it's going to diminish pretty quickly, is my guess.
A really interesting hybrid of those two that exists right now is Webflow. Webflow is really, in my mind, the only, outside like Bubble, but it's the only web builder that truly gives you the granular level of control when it comes to web design, without having to hand code it yourself. And a lot of their push has been to two key spots. One, they have hands down some of the best and most entertaining educational content on the planet. They like laugh out loud funny educational content. The other side of it is I've seen more and more companies start to build, to Simon's point, a hybrid solution on something like Webflow. If it is a lighter app, but it still needs to have some functionality, and it does cross a little bit more into the low code space sometimes, but you can get very far down the way, even with a lower no code back end as well, and get a pretty significant solution built before you go to something that is, truly a monster like Bubble, where you can pretty much build anything you want.
Thanks, Brian. Laura, is that the answer to your question? I want to kind of get through these last questions because I promised these guys I would let them pitch for Simon and John.
Oh, no worries. I was about to say, yeah, Chris has been waiting for a while, but thanks a lot, guys. This has been honestly like a very great conversation, some great input. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Thanks. Come again. We do this room just to kind of reset real quickly. We're talking about kind of building your startup and validating your startup using no code. We do this every Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So definitely come back again. With that, Chris, we're going to take your question and we're going to let Brian pitch after that.
Hi. Yeah, I came here because I know Brian pretty well, but my question is, if for someone who's considering building a website for their club on Clubhouse right now, what platform would you use? Would you use something like WordPress, or would you use a no-code platform? And if so, which one? I'd love to hear from the panelists which platform they would use. Thank you.
I think that, Jeff, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait to see if anybody else. It kind of depends what you want to do. Reference to Webflow earlier on. Webflow is absolutely brilliant for putting together websites. If it's really, really, really simple, use Card, C-A-A-R-D, Card, which is great for kind of landing page stuff. It's a really, really cool little app, and I always try and get people to use it because I love it. If you're going to do something which is a bit more functional, you want to maybe look to a future where you're going to add features like, I don't know, the ability to video conference with people or whatever, then shift to Bubble. So if you want to do something which is a bit more app-like and a bit more, has a bit more functionality, Bubble's the way to go because it's got loads of plugins and it's a far more flexible beast. And finally, if you're just looking at a mobile app rather than building at a site, Adalo is very good. That's a great platform too. So there you go. There's some options for you.
I would add Wix as well. Wix has a really kind of built-in, like really the easy login and kind of membership type functionality. So again, it really just depends on the scope of what you want to build, but there's quite a few different options.
I currently use Wix for some sites, but then there's always, in the SEO community, there's always this back and forth debate over Wix being challenging or problematic for SEO. And I do have that question about some of these other no-code tools as well, which I think makes me keep going back to using WordPress. The challenge with that is that I always need to bring someone else in to do it, as opposed to using some of these platforms like a Wix.
Yeah, Chris. Hi, by the way. Chris and I go back a very long time. If you look at things like Webflow, Card, Bubble, they're kicking out really clean code. I would argue it's cleaner than a lot of WordPress code. I think a lot of the SEOs that are out there that say, "Oh, it's hard," is because they just don't know the platforms. Number one, and number two, a lot of times I found a lot of SEOs, through no fault of their own, are still working under slightly outdated mentalities when it comes to how content gets ranked. I mean, right now, having great content with the right copy count, with the right, no keyword stuffing, those kinds of things, and a cleanly walkable, what's called DOM, which is the actual structure of the page itself, is really key. And all of these platforms are doing that today. The other side of it too is that it's been really easy to integrate in a lot of tracking. The reason why a lot of the optimization tools that are out there today themselves have built no or low code solutions in order to implement their tracking. The biggest thing that you can do, and you can do this pretty much on all of them, microdata is one of the biggest keys to getting a great ranking these days, because it's being given a heavier weight when it comes to how things like Google are crawling and searching sites, and things like rich and featured snippets. That's usually being pulled because of the microdata that's present, and you can do that on all of these platforms as well.
I'll just add something real quick. I mean, I've had a couple of e-commerce sites that I've gotten on page one, and what's always moved the needle for me is the number and quality of links to the site, and that's really platform agnostic. And so I don't necessarily buy into that notion, because I have heard that before. I've actually seen the data on the Wix and the WordPress. So that's my personal opinion, but it's a fair question.
Thank you.